This Was Your Life is a tract that fundamental Christians, who in their evangelistic zeal like to give others. It tells the story of a man who dies and faces divine judgment, watching his entire life replay on a cosmic screen before being condemned to hell for rejecting Christ. The tract ends with an appeal to readers to accept Jesus immediately to avoid the same fate. But today, we're not here to discuss its religious merits or theological accuracy. Instead, we're going to examine this tract as a piece of persuasive media, analyzing its rhetorical techniques, its impact on critical thinking, and the various criticisms it has faced from educators, former readers, and media literacy experts. This analysis isn't about attacking anyone's faith or beliefs. Rather, it's about understanding how persuasive media works, recognizing manipulation techniques, and developing the critical thinking skills necessary to evaluate any form of communication we encounter. Whether you're religious, secular, or somewhere in between, these analytical tools are valuable for navigating our media-saturated world. Let's begin our analysis by examining the rhetorical techniques employed in This Was Your Life. Rhetoric, the art of persuasion, operates through three primary appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. The tract establishes its authority by presenting itself as revealing ultimate truth about life and death, topics about which most readers have genuine uncertainty. The angel character serves as an unquestionable divine authority figure, making pronouncements that brook no debate or discussion. The stark black and white artwork gives it a sense of timeless authority, while the simple, declarative text style mimics biblical language, lending it an air of scriptural weight. However, this authority is largely asserted rather than earned, through evidence or reasoned argument. The tract doesn't engage with counter-arguments or acknowledge alternative perspectives. Instead, it presents its claims as self-evidently true, which should raise red flags for critical thinkers. When we examine what the tract doesn't do with logical appeals, we find that while it makes several claims that could be examined rationally, it provides little to no evidence or reasoning to support them. Where This Was Your Life truly shows its rhetorical colors is in its heavy reliance on emotional appeals, particularly fear. The entire narrative structure is built around existential terror, the fear of death, judgment, and eternal punishment. The man's sudden death emphasizes that judgment could come at any moment, creating urgency and eliminating time for careful consideration. While not as visually explicit as some other chick tracts, this one clearly depicts the horror of eternal damnation, with the emotional weight of these consequences far outweighing any logical presentation of the theological concepts involved. By using an everyman protagonist, the tract encourages readers to see themselves in the condemned character, amplifying the fear response. Most significantly, it presents only two options: immediate acceptance of its specific theological position or eternal damnation. This false binary eliminates nuance and forces an emotional rather than rational decision. The message essentially becomes, this must be true because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. One of the most significant criticisms of This Was Your Life is its consistent use of straw man arguments. The tract reduces the entire question of human meaning, morality, and spiritual purpose to a simple binary choice. It doesn't engage with the rich philosophical and theological traditions that have grappled with these questions for millennia. Instead, it presents a caricatured version of non-Christian thinking that's easy to dismiss. The tract implies that all non-Christian approaches to spirituality and meaning are essentially the same: a rejection of God that leads to damnation. This ignores the sophisticated theological and philosophical arguments within other religious traditions, as well as the diversity of Christian thought itself. The condemned man is presented as someone who lived selfishly and rejected obvious truth, creating a stereotype that allows Christian readers to distance themselves from non-believers rather than engage with the legitimate questions and concerns. that lead people to different conclusions about faith. Perhaps most importantly, the tract never presents the condemned man's actual reasons for his beliefs or lack thereof. We don't hear his questions, his struggles, or his sincere attempts to understand life's meaning. Instead, we get a one-sided presentation that makes his position appear obviously wrong. This approach does a disservice not only to non-Christians, but also to Christian readers, who are denied the opportunity to engage with genuine challenges to their faith and develop more robust and thoughtful responses. The tract's reliance on fear-based reasoning raises serious concerns about its impact on critical thinking. While fear can be a powerful motivator, it's also a dangerous foundation for belief and decision-making. This Was Your Life presents infinite consequences, eternal damnation for finite actions, specifically rejecting a particular theological position. This extreme disproportion makes rational cost-benefit analysis impossible. While the tract offers salvation through Jesus, it provides little concrete guidance about what this actually means in practice, presenting the solution as simple when the underlying theology is actually quite complex. Fear-based reasoning actively undermines critical thinking in several ways. When we're afraid, our emotional processing centers can override our rational thinking. This evolutionary adaptation helps us respond quickly to immediate physical threats, but it's counterproductive when dealing with complex philosophical and spiritual questions. The tract's emphasis on urgency discourages the careful consideration that important life decisions deserve, treating spiritual commitment like a fire drill rather than a thoughtful life choice. Once someone has made a fear-based decision, they're likely to seek out information that confirms their choice and avoid information that challenges it. This creates a closed loop that's resistant to new evidence or reasoning. Former readers of Chick tracts, particularly those who encountered them as children, have reported various negative psychological effects, including religious trauma, difficulty with nuance in thinking, and relationship problems stemming from the tract's us versus them mentality. Another significant area of concern is the tract's relationship with factual accuracy and information reliability. Critics have noted a pattern throughout Chick's work of accepting information from questionable sources without adequate verification, often relying heavily on dramatic testimonies without corroborating stories or examining credibility. This approach models poor critical thinking for readers, encouraging them to accept dramatic testimonies at face value if they support the desired conclusion, rather than teaching them to evaluate sources carefully and maintain appropriate skepticism. Intellectual honesty requires acknowledging the limitations of our knowledge, fairly representing opposing viewpoints, and being willing to revise our beliefs when presented with better evidence. This Was Your Life falls short of these standards by presenting certainty where uncertainty might be more appropriate, and by failing to engage seriously with alternative perspectives. Even when dealing with questions of values, meaning, and purpose that go beyond scientific measurement, intellectual honesty still requires fair representation of different viewpoints and acknowledgement of the complexity involved. One of the most troubling aspects of This Was Your Life is its frequent distribution to children and its potential impact on young developing minds. Children are particularly vulnerable to fear-based messaging because they haven't yet developed the cognitive tools necessary to evaluate complex claims critically. The comic book format can blur the line between fantasy and claimed truth for young readers, while the prospect of eternal damnation can create paralyzing fear that interferes with normal childhood development. The tract encourages immediate decision-making about complex spiritual questions that might be better explored gradually over time. Many critics have raised ethical questions about targeting children with fear-based religious messaging, noting that unlike adults, children can't simply choose not to engage with material that disturbs them. The tract's simple language and comic book format make it accessible to children, but its content deals with adult themes of mortality, judgment, and eternal consequences. This mismatch between accessibility and content complexity raises serious questions about appropriate audience targeting. To better understand the problems with "This Was Your Life," it's helpful to consider alternative approaches to spiritual communication that prioritize critical thinking and honest inquiry. Many religious educators and interfaith workers have developed approaches that encourage spiritual exploration while maintaining intellectual honesty. These include question-based learning that encourages people to explore their own questions about meaning and purpose, comparative study that involves learning about different spiritual traditions, and process-oriented growth that recognizes spiritual development as typically a gradual process unfolding over time. Progressive religious education increasingly recognizes that doubt and questioning can be healthy parts of spiritual development, rather than threats to be eliminated. Some traditions explicitly celebrate questions and uncertainty as necessary components of authentic spiritual seeking. Acknowledging the limitations of human understanding can lead to more humble and open approaches to spiritual truth, while creating communities where people can safely explore their questions and doubts can lead to more robust and personally meaningful faith. This Was Your Life provides an excellent case study for developing media literacy skills. When encountering any persuasive message, whether religious, political, or commercial, we should ask key questions. Who created this message and why? What techniques are being used to persuade me? What information is being left out? How does this message make me feel and why? What would credible critics say about these claims? Certain characteristics should raise immediate skepticism in any persuasive media. Messages that demand immediate action without time for consideration are often manipulative. Presenting only two options when more alternatives exist is a common manipulation technique. While some fears are legitimate, disproportionate fear appeals often indicate weak underlying arguments. Claims of perfect knowledge about complex, uncertain topics should be viewed skeptically, and messages that refuse to engage with legitimate criticism often have something to hide. Critical thinking isn't about becoming cynical or rejecting all claims. It's about developing the tools to evaluate information fairly and make informed decisions. This involves learning to identify logical fallacies, practicing perspective-taking to understand why reasonable people might disagree with compelling claims, seeking multiple sources for important information, embracing uncertainty about complex questions that experts debate, and valuing the process of how we reach conclusions rather than just defending predetermined positions. Our analysis of This Was Your Life reveals a complex piece of persuasive media that, while successful in reaching a large audience, employs techniques that undermine rather than promote critical thinking and honest inquiry. Understanding how persuasive techniques work helps us evaluate all kinds of media more effectively. Fear-based appeals, while potentially motivating, often come at the expense of rational decision-making and psychological well-being. The importance of source credibility reminds us to evaluate the track record and methodology of our information sources, while the vulnerability of certain audiences requires special consideration when it comes to persuasive messaging. Whether you're religious or secular, the skills needed to critically evaluate This Was Your Life are the same ones needed to navigate our complex information environment. We must practice intellectual humility by recognizing the limitations of our own knowledge and remaining open to new information. We should seek out credible sources with good track records and transparent methodologies, understand our own biases that affect how we process information, value the process of reaching conclusions rather than just defending predetermined positions, and embrace the complexity that real life usually presents. This analysis isn't intended to attack anyone's faith or spiritual seeking. Rather, it demonstrates that we can honor our deepest questions about meaning and purpose while still maintaining intellectual honesty and critical thinking skills. The techniques we've discussed, understanding rhetoric, recognizing manipulation, evaluating sources, and thinking critically, are valuable tools for everyone, regardless of their religious or philosophical orientation. In a world full of competing claims about truth, meaning, and the good life, these skills help us navigate toward more thoughtful, compassionate, and well-informed decisions. Whether you encounter religious tracts, political advertisements, news media, or social media posts, remember that your critical thinking skills are among your most valuable assets. Use them wisely, encourage others to do the same, and continue. This important conversation about media literacy and critical thinking in our complex world.